Hi everyone, welcome to our Resilient Community Workshop. Tonight we're going to have Hope as our speaker. Before we get started, I'm going to introduce Hope to everyone. Hope was born in a multicultural family. Hope is the second generation Macedonian through her father, and her mother is indigenous. Hope is very passionate and driven to being of service to the community and understanding of the human psychology. She has overcome a lot of traumas in her own past with a family history of addiction and mental health challenges. Her goal is to provide as much services and healing to as many people as she can. And she helps with integrating what she learned into helping the community member in the society, such as jobs, schooling, therapy, housing, and groups. So without further ado, welcome Hope.
All right, so welcome to Healing Connection. A supporting light for better mental health. So today, the topic that we're talking about is impacts of parental absence. So before I get started, I just want to warn everybody that some things may be a little bit triggering if you have experienced any parental absence. So tonight's mission, there's also going to be a part 2 to this as well. So I'm just going to talk about the beginning today. So first, we're going to be talking about what do you think parental absence is, what parental absence is, and do you think parental absence has any effects with our mental health as adults, ways parental absence affects our mental health, and effects with homelessness, incarceration, prostitution from parental absence, and statistics of parental absence. I'm just going to move that. So parental absence in adults. So what is parental absence? Any ideas? Does anybody want to share on what they think parental absence is?
I'll go with
emotional or physical detachment with a parent from a child.
Absolutely. And James? Yeah. Oh, sorry, go ahead. I can't really see who wants to talk.
It's okay. Yeah, I was just gonna say, so like maybe a parent is emotionally unavailable because maybe they suffer from addiction or mental illness, or maybe they're physically unavailable because they either are working a lot and they don't have time to spend with the family, and that may cause them also to be emotionally unavailable, as well as physically unavailable, or they may have actually left the family for some reason. Yeah,
absolutely. All of that. Every single thing. Those are all examples of parental absence. Does anybody else want to share? No? Okay. So parental absence is also known as the missing parent syndrome. This can be because of mental illness, personality disorder, or something else such as a job, career goal, or educational endeavor, divorce, death, financial issues, and being emotionally unavailable. This can have a substantial effect on the subconscious brain that carries out into adulthood. So do you think parental absence has anything to do with our relationships as adults? If so, can you think of some examples? Would anyone like to share?
I would. James, sorry. So I would say that if you don't have a parent that teaches you, like, let's say, growing up, I was always taught that there's I guess you would say a better word for it. This is how I was taught, is like how you treat a woman, certain things that you got to do. Like, let's say, for instance, when you walk with a woman down the street, you always walk on the outside of the road and let the woman walk on the inside, just common courtesies along like that. Those are things that you would learn from a mother. Whereas like, I guess a father would be more of a, I guess, more predominant, like you have to take care of the family. This is so if I feel if you miss one of those things from either one of them, it could cause problems in future relationships.
Absolutely. And we're going to get further into each specific role with the development of this next week in our part 2.
Fair
But
enough. Sorry.
absolutely. No, don't be sorry. Thank you for sharing. And Amina?
Oh, sorry.
sorry.
Go ahead.
I just seen, I think Amina had her hand up.
Hey, it can affect us as adults, where like perhaps if you were close to your parent as a child and then the parent abandons the family, leaves for whatever reason, you may, like, depending how you dealt with that as a child, you may grow up getting into relationships where you're afraid of abandonment. So maybe you might leave before, like you might leave relationships before you're left. You know, you might always kind of want to get the jump on it because you're expecting that from from a loved one.
Yep.
So you kind of get the jump on it, and you may leave relationships before they leave you, kind of thing. So it can affect your relationships in that way.
Absolutely. Thank you. That definitely plays like a huge factor. I know personally in my past, I've actually experienced exactly that, but I have learned to obviously heal that abandonment wound, but it's definitely plays a huge role.
Yeah, me too. I guess, I don't know, whoever else wants to speak, but I have another example.
For sure.
Sorry, I think James wanted to say something.
No, go. I want to hear. I'm curious. Sorry.
Well, I guess the opposite, or another way that a person's fear of abandonment may manifest in adulthood, maybe to be clingy, like very clingy to the person that they end up in a relationship. Like they don't want to let them go, so they end up being very emotionally clingy.
Absolutely. And that shows up as anxious attachment style. So most definitely.
So if a parent was to be, if it was only one parent that was around and they were constantly frustrated and their child sees that, that could be carried on into their future relationships as well. The way that their parents display behaviors will show off to their children as well, I believe. Am I not correct, I think?
Yep, 1000% you're correct. That's definitely a big thing. A lot of the time we'll tend to cling on to subconsciously what we're familiar with. So that's how we actually bring these childhood wounds into our adult relationships, because it's a familiar trauma. So we don't do it consciously, but we do it unconsciously.
Janie has a question, Hope.
Of course.
No, I just wanted to share.
Of course.
So I never had a safe environment growing up, living in an abusive environment that should have been safe as a child. And I didn't know, and I'm glad we're doing this kind of workshop, like I didn't know as an adult why I chose the relationships I did, or why I was the way I was, until I started, my own journey of healing. And I realized that I had very unhealthy attachments and codependent relationships and things like that. And it was all a result of the childhood trauma. And I didn't trust, and I thought everybody was going to hurt me. So I would push my partners to the limits to see how far they would go and if they would hurt me back, which is obviously very unhealthy as well. So it's good that we talk about this, because I don't think as adults we ever sit there and think and reflect as to why do we do the things we do, and where do they come from?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing. It definitely, we don't think about that. And when we finally do, then we are able to like correlate all the patterns to our relationships. And I know, personally speaking, I definitely was seeing patterns in my relationships, and I actually did similar things to you. I dealt with a lot of like codependency, a lot of toxic situations, and again, I would push my partners to the limit to see if I would be hurt back, and then also like the abandonment as well. Thank you. Anybody else? All right, I'm gonna move on. So, if we didn't know, our childhood affects our relationships and how we interact with others later in life. So yes, this does have a huge impact. If we were loved and cared for to where our needs were met, we will most likely exhibit the same traits as adults. If we were abused and neglected, we will most likely develop characteristics to protect ourselves as adults, such as being defensive or overly protective, or develop characteristics of a control freak. This also has an effect on our attachment style and how we assert ourselves in relationships, such as avoiding relationships, because when a parent rejects you or is unresponsive to your needs growing up, this can result in relationship avoidance as an adult, and choosing destructive relationships. For instance, someone who grew up with a verbally abusive alcoholic parental figure may find themselves with friendships or a partner that inflicts that same emotional abuse, and struggling to process emotions. When you do feel a strong emotion like sadness or anger, it can be incredibly challenging to process those emotions. These unexpected feelings can leave you feeling overwhelmed and unstable. So some more things that I didn't say, but we talked about before, were codependency, anxious attachment, also finding yourself in abusive relationships if you grew up in an abusive household, and finding yourself in destructive relationships if that was the example that was set for you as a child, and being overly protective of yourself, as well as being possessive too, because again, that comes into feeling as if your partner can be taken away from you, so you want to take all possession of that person. But yeah.
Hey-ho.
You
I was
like
just
stated some really, really interesting facts there, like kind of almost like you're talking to me. Are you talking to me, Hope?
Talking to all of us.
it's resonating a bit. Yeah, I was gonna say. I was just gonna say. So these, like, I guess it would be more of a say characteristics, because it's something that would be the person that has experienced these things. They gauge towards what's more familiar to them in that sense. Then.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's an unconscious patterning that we created as a child, because well, between the age of, I believe it's 3 and 7 is where you're collecting all of your information on all of your development, from how your relationships are set as an example, to just the way that your attachment style is, to your personality and how you're building your identity. So yeah, it definitely, we cling on to what we're familiar with. And a lot of the times it's a lot of the traumas that we've gone through.
Cool.
So that familiarity is almost like a comfort to us, and that's why we cling on to it.
Yep.
Okay,
Unfortunately.
yeah, crazy. Yeah.
Yep. It's crazy, but yeah.
Well, it's different when you haven't been shown how to conduct yourself in certain ways. Hence to why it would be the parental absence in that sense, right? Because you're not learning from that parental figure or whatever you're missing from that development stage.
Exactly.
Not only that, but sometimes you don't even know there's different.
Mm-hmm.
You don't even know, like, because you're talking about being a child and this is what you're shown. And it isn't until, like, you know, like for me, stumble across like my husband is a great person, and I'm just like, who are you? Like, this is real, like people are like this. You don't even know that like there is better or there is different. You're just used to the way that you were brought up and you attract those things. So like that's just your world, I feel.
Yeah, you're used to how you react in those situations. And then I guess it's not until we're adults and we see how other people are and other relationships are that you're like,
Yeah.
oh, I kind of compare yours with theirs and be like, oh, like I didn't even think that was possible. But okay. But that's when we're like, I'm just using myself as an example. That's when I started being like, well, shit, there's something wrong with me then. What's wrong with me? And that's when, I guess your self-awareness comes in and you are able to start your healing journey.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what happens. And it's crazy because a lot of the times I say parental absence, but they don't necessarily have to be absent. It's just the example that was set for you. So again, and like, for example, a mother with an abusive boyfriend or vice versa, you're seeing that and now you're carrying that in your subconscious mind and attracting it.
So that means you'll carry it into your future relationships. Wow.
Exactly.
Talk about mind-blowing conversation all over the place.
Yeah, I do agree. It honestly is. Like when I first came to understand these patterns, I was just as mind blown. Like a lot of things just, they meet the dots. So it's pretty crazy how our subconscious mind works. All right, I'm gonna move on now. So what are some ways that parental absence affects your mental health as an adult? Any ideas?
Well, I would feel that your behavior would definitely be one, because you would lack a behavior of from whatever parent would be missing, because each parent brings a certain element to that family dynamic, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Anybody else?
I feel like a lack of self-esteem and same things, self-esteem and confidence in yourself, and especially within the area of where you feel you're lacking from your parental, whether it be complete absence or whether it was neglect, like an abandonment, any of that kind of things. Like we all, I guess, deal with it differently, but for me it came out in anxiety. I had a lot of anxiety when it came to things, just really unsure about everything.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
would you say that in a way that parental absence could be intergenerational in a sense?
Yes, I was going to talk about that as well.
Oh.
But yes, it definitely is intergenerational, because you're basically being given these tools from your parents, and then you become a parent. And if you didn't acknowledge and become self-aware to the lack that you didn't receive as a child, then you basically carry it on to your child. So it creates intergenerational trauma. So
Wow.
Go to the next one. So the effects on our mental health as adults. So research has shown that children who receive abundant support from their parents report fewer psychological issues in adulthood, whereas adults who received inadequate parental support while growing up are likely to have poorer health as adults, such as depression, anxiety, suicide, social anxiety, codependency, lack of confidence, lack of worth, lack of self-esteem, difficulty trusting, difficulty setting boundaries, difficulty expressing oneself, and problems with purpose and motivation. And lastly, reincarnating their trauma to their child, known as intergenerational trauma. So intergenerational trauma is a huge part of this as well.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Wow. This is interesting. I didn't know a lot of this stuff, you know. I mean, it, wow.
You know,
Well,
with hope, like for me, hope, I knew. So like obviously I didn't know anything, but I did know as an adult, like the physical, like the sexual abuse, like that was very obvious. And then I also knew like my mom not really being the protector that she should have been or showed any like affection that affected me. So instead of repeating those patterns, I wanted to ensure that I provided safety for my kids as well as everything that I felt that I didn't get. But what's crazy is I didn't understand like the codependency and the anxious attachments and all of those things were all associated. So it's such a deep, it goes so deep,
It does go very, very deep. And personally, I don't have any children yet, but I started acknowledging a lot of the intergenerational trauma from my family, and a lot of what has happened to my mom was because it happened to her mom, and she just didn't acknowledge those things. And I'm definitely taking the time to heal that so that I don't bring it into my children's life. But yes, it is crazy how deep this topic really is. I'm gonna continue. So I want to emphasize that only a minority of the population will face homelessness in their lifetime. But for those who do, it is one of the most difficult hardships they will ever endure. Parental separations can create conflicts between parents and children, which may drive children out of their parents' home and potentially into homelessness. A number of studies have reported a relationship between running away from home and involvement in prostitution or trading of sex for survival needs. Runaway youths and young adults lacking employment and financial resources may resort to sex for money, drugs, shelter, or other survival purposes. Running away may be a response to an abusive or neglectful home environment for some. Living on the street due to running away or being kicked out have been found to correlate between trading sex and other criminal activities, such as theft and burglary. Another example can be an influence from a parental guardian. For instance, they may have been taught from childhood to steal and violence and pimping and drug dealing and doing drugs, or for better words, living the street life. So this is just a diagram of basically the steps of how people get into prostitution in their adulthood.
So this is the dynamics of how it starts from the childhood, which is the far left, and then it goes over to what the end result is. Okay, I just want to make sure.
And this is basically where they end off when they're really in a survival mode. And it's not talked about that often how prostitution is actually initiated. And a lot of it comes down from being in a survival mode and being in abusive households or having neglectful parents and having an absent parent as well. A lot of the time, it does come down to having an absent father for a lot of young women, and also young men as well. But it is a big problem in our society. So this is the statistics of an absent parental figure. And through my research, I have found that the father absence is a lot higher than a mother absence. So there are roughly 150,000 lone parent families in Canada, with 80% of those being female lone parent families. Female lone parent families made up 13% of all CENIAS families, while male lone parent households were only 3.5%. So 1 out of 3 live in homes without a biological father. 90% of homeless and runaway children, 85% of children with behavior disorders, 85% of all youths in prison, 71% of all high school dropouts, 63% of youth suicides, 120% at greater risk to become a subject of child abuse, and 7 times more likely to become pregnant as a teen. So I'm going to get more into this in part 2, in terms of the specific effects with a father absent, as well as the specific effects of a mother's absence. But it has been proven to have a higher rate than mother absence. So thank you guys for being here. I hope that I get to see you guys all next week at part 2. And I just have a quote here that says, "Out of suffering have emerged the strongest souls. The most massive characters are seared with scars." So thank you guys for sharing and also being so vulnerable. And I hope to see you next week.
Thank you, Hope. I was just wondering if you could,
Wonderful.
sorry, I was wondering if you could explain the last statistic, the one on the right where it just says like 80% of the lone parent families are female lone parent families, so like the mother, I guess. But then it says, I'm not sure, like I don't know what, and then it says female lone parent families made up 13%, and then I don't understand the difference.
So
Sorry.
basically, what it's saying is they have a father, like a male figure there, but it's not the biological father. That's the
Okay.
difference with the 13%. But
Oh,
80% is like them being by
I see.
themselves. And then,
Ah, okay, I get it now. All right, yeah, thank you for clarifying.
any other questions, guys? That was a good question, though. It wasn't as
This was a topic, man. There's so many questions rifling through my brain right now. I think I think I gotta think about it. That was good. No, honestly, I really like that. Thanks, Hope. I appreciate your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
So
I'm looking forward to part 2.
thank you.